All right, so the color holds to make the gem on his bag. I just made a duplicate of that, and I have this as a second color hold layer on top. So I'll call it color hold 2. And then I can just blur that layer. I can even use things like lens flares and different effects. And I can add layer styles to just that. So I can make it glow. I can make it kind of contrasted. I can give it even more red with a color overlay. I can gradate it behind at an angle or radial. So many options just to make that a little bit more interesting, right? And once you have a layer style selected, even if you paint, it will add the layer style to your paint selections. And then if you soften it from there, we'll just keep doing different stuff. So if I make it kind of this glowing gem, give it some highlights. You can really kind of have fun with your color holds and make it look more like a special effect than the rest of your art. Going for kind of an emerald look, not an emerald, a ruby look. But I should probably reference one so I know what I'm doing. All right, so there he's got that in his bag, or on his bag. So that's how color holds can be effective. All these different ways. As layer styles on the line work, and then also over the top. Maybe the most common color hold we see in digital coloring now are just little sparkles. So if I want to make his eyes twinkle, I just use, I'll call this the twinkle color hold. And you'll see this on logo types all the time as well, especially video game stuff like Legend of Zelda. But I could just paint with white, paint little twinkles, little stars. To show that his sword is shiny. Shiny. And then when it's on colored backgrounds, you can see those twinkles very strongly. And you can just draw them like that. And then, of course, you can take their opacity down a little bit. And you can soften them a little bit with Gaussian blur. I think that's too much. Let's see. That's why we're able to control our filters and the amount. And there we go. You can even move them en masse a little bit. So a little bit of twinkle. All right, now how does this apply to the text? Well, all the things you can do for spot illustration, you can also do for text. So what did I do first? Well, I just took those same effects that I applied to the line work for my Zelda right here, and I made a duplicate of them, and then I moved those effects, because effects can move layer to layer, and I moved them onto my Zelda logo type. But I'm not done with that. So I'm going to move it to a gray background now, just because that's a nice stand-in for different colors, different textures. And now I'm going to play with some more effects. What if I want a stroke on it? And maybe I want the stroke to have a certain color, and I want that color to be lighter than it is dark, and I want it to be a certain size. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Then what if I want an inner shadow? It can give me the illusion of kind of a 3D effect. I'll make it nice and strong. Same thing with an inner glow on the other end. I can decide how soft I want it to be. Not sure I like the inner glow as much as the inner shadow, but let's see. A little bit of it is helpful. Now it is very possible to overdo these things, but I just want you to know the options you have. And then of course drop shadows, which are probably quite overused, but can be very effective, especially in poster design, at getting your type solution to really stand out. And what I like about Photoshop is you get to see all these things in real time. There are ways you can do these effects within Illustrator, but this is just more comfortable as a design tool. And then of course, maybe the most dramatic is this Bevel and Emboss tool, which allows you to make your text have a certain texture. You can even import different textures. So let's look at some of these individual options. I can invert that texture. I can play with how grainy it is, how bumpy it is. You can choose different patterns. I'm using the sand pattern. You just have so many different things to play with. The depth of it, how contrasted it is, how subtle it is. And it does help, especially to break up just simple gradations. You also have a satin filter, which has to do with lighting and how lighting kind of comes through it. And you can also play with different blending modes on all of these. So everything makes a slight difference, and it's worth playing with. If I want to brighten it, I'll put it on a screen mode, and then see if there's anywhere. So the satin only darkens, so I don't think I need that. Mine's already pretty dark. Now in terms of the bevel and emboss options, there's also different techniques. And so you can also do things like chisel, which will look much sharper. So this is how you get that kind of old three-dimensional look, is with a chisel contour or chisel hard. And that might be really appropriate for Zelda Airlines. And you can play with the size till it suits your needs. That looks pretty good. But it's probably overdone. So, and then you can add a texture to that. Now my stroke I'm not that happy with yet, just because I don't like the cutout there. So let me make it a little bit bigger so it really fills in, or maybe even just smaller. Yeah, like that. That looks nice. And you can play with all of these settings. If I want to change these colors, not quite so dark, let's brighten that up and saturate it. Brighten this up. Brighten this up. Maybe make it more yellow. All right. Try different blending modes. Yeah, so we're getting there. The outer glow might soften this stroke a little bit, which is very abrupt. That texture is really strong. Let me dim that a little bit. And now that I have so many different effects, it takes a while to even see what they do. There we are. But it shows you the power of these things. All right, so let's try the outer glow. And we got to make it big enough. Yeah, there we go, that it just softens the edge without going overboard. And you, of course, can pick a color for that too, but I'm just going to leave that white. Okay, so now I have a type solution that works pretty well on gray, which is the most versatile, which means it will look pretty good on black, which means it will look pretty good on white, right? And I have my spot illustration with all the color holds and things I want. And maybe I don't need quite so much of the shadows. I can take that opacity down a little bit. Or if I want more, I could duplicate those. So many different options. All right, now we're going to play with textures. So I'm going to turn on the gray background again. And this goes back to texture fills. Just like we added a pattern to the text to kind of break it up a little bit, that's going to print really beautifully. We want to do that for our spot illustration too, which looks kind of weak comparatively. So what I like to do is to search. Let me save that work. But while it's saving, search for a texture fill that I think will fit. So I want kind of a parchment, an old animal hide kind of texture fill. It's going to be very subtle. And because parchment is such a common one, there's a lot of tutorials about how to do it. It doesn't even matter what scale they are. I just want it to be a little bit kind of splotchy and interesting. And to limit them, let me look for just large. Though for texture fills, it's not as important. So this one looks pretty good. I tend to like textures that come from direct scans. I also use a lot of watercolor texture fills. Watercolor paper and kind of the variations that happened in watercolor. On this one's pretty. Let's see if it has a watermark. It doesn't even matter what the color is because what I'm most interested in is the texture, right? But if I want variations of color, these might be helpful. So I'm going to save all of those to the desktop. Different texture fills I might want to experiment with. This one actually does have watermarks, but they probably won't matter in the way that I end up using it. These do not. All right, so let me show you. First, the parchment texture fill. Let me try first going to the very top layer and just moving this in over everything. And this is how we're dealing with backgrounds for our poster. So maybe I do something like this. If I wanted to, I could even make use of the edge that's in this texture fill. Then hit return. Its resolution is softened a little bit because I grew it, but since it was large, I didn't even have to grow it that much. Now I'm going to play with the different blending modes, like overlaying it, or soft lighting it, or pin lighting it. These are the ones I tend to try. So as an overlay, it works well, but I want to play with the opacity. And what this texture fill is for, it might be nice for the whole thing, but I'm looking particularly at how it affects the coloring of my character.